everyone, and welcome to This Week in Games number 305, where we read and distill all the weekly game industry news so you don't have to. Here's what we're talking about today. Sorry, we got to talk about Netflix because there were some massive changes there, and we have takes, although Cress isn't here, and so it might be different takes. Well, you know what he would say anyway. Is AA dead? So that's one of the topics. Age of Empires launches, but it might not be the launch that you expected. And then Delta Force also has some stuff. And before we were talking, Phil teased like his POV on this, and it wasn't what I expected, so I can't wait to get there. So let's make sure we get there. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Donahoe, strategic marketing consultant at Jade Inferno and Beta Hat. And today we have, of course, Phillip Black, game economist at Game Economist Consulting.
Let's cook.
Chef of Deconstructor of Fun, Mishka Katkoff.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know what area code 305 is?
No.
Miami. So this episode's about to be funny. We better talk about crypto then.
Is that a joke?
No, it's true. 305. This is episode 305. Area code 305 is Miami. Okay, dad jokes. Let's move on. Let's move on.
You're not the funny one, my friend, so I didn't expect it from you. Adam Telfer, the product guy. Welcome.
Hey, and the 6 in the 406. There you go.
Oh, geez. You're killing me this morning. Okay, so Cress and Laura both aren't here, but I am going to just do a quick recap. With the three of us were at Games Forum SF on Tuesday. We had the best gig, which is a panel that was going on at the end of the day. And it was really designed for us to go to all of the panels and then dish on what we heard for the rest of the panels. It was pretty fun. We had a special guest, Matt Harris, who is VP of Product for in-game ads at Activision Blizzard Media. And this guy is legit. He did War in the Trenches at Tapjoy. He was at Google. He was at Meta. This guy is an ad guy. And I think he's going to go to battle with John Wright for the new spirit animal for the Deconstructor of Fun community. He's just the nicest guy. He was super funny. He was super informative. And you wouldn't expect this authenticity from an ad guy. So thank you, Matt, for joining us. And then JK, Joseph Kim, actually was there. And so I invited him up on stage for a mini DOF reunion. And of course, Cress. And he got into a little bit of fight about AA versus AAA, which we will actually talk about later. And then when Cress comes back, he can fill us in. So thanks to the Games Forum folks for having us. It was fun to be together in person on stage.
Cress looks so happy in that photo that you shared.
Yes.
Grumpy. Where was the event? Where it was in San Francisco, but where?
Marriott Marquis.
How dangerous area is that at? We're talking about streets. Is it 6th, 5th, 4th? Where are we?
It was okay. It was okay. By the Mel's Diner. It was okay. And, it's San Francisco, so
yeah.
A lot of Waymos. It was, the self-driving cars. If you haven't seen them, it's pretty creepy to watch people get into a car with no driver, and they go around. I downloaded the app, but I didn't get a chance to use it because I'm not often in San Francisco. But all right, so let's do a little shilling. It was also LA Tech Week last week, and I did a bunch, because it's LA. I did a bunch of conferences. I got to see the Xsola team, and so they actually just released their latest report. So in that report, their summer report, they talk a lot about the influencer industry. So just calling out a quick blurb from them, the influencer industry is booming, projected to be worth $24 billion this year. And gamers rely on influencers for entertainment and game recommendations. I think we all know that pretty intimately. And so there were some stats, and they talk a little bit about indie games in there as well. So go to their website. Let's see, xsola.pro/TX. Just go to their website and download it. I'm sure you can all figure it out. Thanks to them, they're doing a lot of great work and pulling stats together. I think the next one is going to be really, really mobile focused. I gave Berkeley some feedback. I'm like, dude, just go deep on mobile, please. Get me that data.
LiveOps. $24 billion for influencers. Where's the money at?
Oh, you know where it is?
Kind of influencers.
Well, Actually, yeah, we're in this weird zone of like, we're not quite press, we're not quite influencers, we're sort of consultants. Yeah, we need to call ourselves.
I'm not a consultant. Yeah, you guys do your own thing.
Yeah. Says Adam,
sorry,
who was
product
consulting
guy.
for like 3 years straight. Okay.
All right.
I got rid of that.
Yeah, you got hired by your client.
Yeah,
that's
I got
what
actually
happened.
hired. It's good.
So let's not bomb on consultants. Anyway, so I got a couple of shows as well. You've heard of Heroic Labs by now, and we keep talking about them because you need every edge to be successful in today's market. Heroic Labs GameStack is built like a brick house. You got the Nakama, their backend game server, Hero, their game development framework, Satori, their LiveOps service, and last but not least, Heroic Cloud to provide massive scalability. Heroic Labs is a battle-tested partner, and their tech enables you to be flexible, creative, and scale for success. Focus on your game, avoid tech risks, grow your product with scalable LiveOps, and save a big chunk of cheese, all with Heroic Labs. We got a blog write-up, Transmedia Triumphs and Traps. So that was written by editor Kate Halewood. Check that one out on Deconstructor Fun blog. And that blog post is based on my interview with Peter Levin, who is the founder, co-founder and managing director of Griffin Gaming Fund. So LA-based gaming fund, biggest in the world, 1 billion is the size of the fund. So we had a fun recording with Peter in the sense that there were questions. Of course, it's a financial institution, a big financial institution, so they also always want to see the questions in advance, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of wrote everything, but it kind of got like missed somehow. So he came totally unprepared. He was like, "Are there any questions?" I'm like, "No, I think we're gonna wing it." And so he was jet lagged, and it was early morning in Helsinki. And I think what do you guys think? Did you have a chance to check out? Yeah,
probably your second best podcast this year, honestly.
100% unscripted, because he was like, I never saw any questions, and so it was really fun to record because there were no questions, and it was just fun to ask somebody who's in LA. We talked a lot about the IPs, and he's such an OG. Like he's been in the industry forever and worked not only with gaming media but with games as well as the Hollywood studio. So it's a pretty fun interaction. So check that one out. And if you're coming in for Slush, we have a couple of spots left for on-site recording in that same studio. We got, of course, Moritz, Jen's new friend. I got the photo. He sent me a selfie. So you're being influenced.
He is so lovely.
Yes.
And he came up like before and he was like, "Jen, oh my God." And I was like, I felt so cool. I felt validated in my life that Moritz recognized me and came up and gave me a big hug and sent me Mishka a selfie.
Yeah, so Moritz is coming in on the podcast. He cannot bring his baby on the podcast. He asked that. And then we got Kim Nordstrom coming in on the podcast to talk about Up, Down, Up. He has an audiobook coming out. He has more interview. He especially brought in more female voice to his updated version. So we're going to talk about the book for the first time on this podcast. Of course, I've been traveling with a book. I lost the book. Then I had to get the PDF, and then I found the book. So I have like multiple of these books. I got the signed version, the non-signed version, well, anyways. So he's coming on the podcast. I'm really excited about both of those. But if you want to come in on the podcast, DM me either on Slack or LinkedIn. I have only 2 spots left. So let me know. I will choose out of those the most interesting ones. I tried to get a legit princess. That did not happen. So now I'm trying to get a founder of one of the biggest companies. I can't name it, but hopefully I'll get those. So then it will be one founder, 1 spot left. Anyways, Slush, if you're coming, podcast, let's do it.
Awesome. I see you also wrote a blog post about the 4 reasons why CMOs get fired. And thank you again for writing a fucking marketing post and not talking to me about it.
This post is not out. It's you have it on your table if you want to add any comments. The post next week is going to be 4 reasons why CMOs get fired. Jen is going to leave her comments on it, and then it's going to come out. So if you're not subscribing to the newsletter, please do. You'll find out why CMOs get fired.
I like how you're the marketing expert now. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's
You're
not written
really
by
good.
me.
You're really good at it. Yeah.
It's
No.
not written by me, but
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So let's get into some of the headlines. A new report from Dentsu reveals that the value of the gaming industry has reached 184 billion. This is typically around the same amount that I see from our friends at Newzoo and some of the other sources. What was interesting is some of the other facts that they had in here. So the next thing they talk about was that this 184 billion surpasses the combined value of both the music industry and the film industries. And so we've always been saying this for a long time. Music is like 28 billion and film is kind of 34 billion.
The word film is doing a lot of work there. Like there's a lot of things around film, like DVD sales, that usually aren't included in this figure, which we repeat back to people over and over again to justify our own self-importance of like how valuable the gaming industry. And like, do you remember how many times like I feel like everyone in the gaming industry can recite this fact that we're worth more than film and music.
Yeah, it's awesome. And Phil, DVDs sales, like that's a thing. We do those still.
Sure, but there's
They're not
streaming rights.
coasters?
There's a lot of things that come after, like the theatrical release, that generate revenue that sometimes is not included in that number we like to quote.
Okay, fair point. I think, but still, like if it's 33 billion versus 184, feels kind of bigger. Feels kind of bigger. So a couple of the other points were interesting. Boomers Unite, the average age of a gamer has gone up from 33 years to 37 years. Oof. Right? Like, I mean, but I love this. I love that. I was in a Lyft or an Uber, and the driver was a grandma, literally a grandma. She's showing me pictures of her kids, and she's like, what do you do? And I'm like, I do video game marketing. She's like, I don't play any games. And she's like, well, what do you do? What games are you playing? I'm like, we're all matched. She's like, girl, what level are you on? I'm on level 9,000. And I'm like, wait, I thought you said you're not a gamer. And so that's just the world that we live in is, grandmas are now like the biggest cohort of gamers out there. The last point in this is transmedia rules. Cress isn't here, so I can say transmedia 10 times today. Over half feel favorable about entertainment franchises expanding into gaming. So that was fun. Of course, we love to see our IPs in there.
Half? That's all you could get was 51% of people to say they feel favorable. And this is about entertainment franchises expanding into gaming, not gaming going into entertainment, which I think I'd also point out. But like, Jesus, I mean, I think Congress has a higher approval rating than 51%. I mean,
I would. I don't think so. Okay. So next, our friends at TikTok have a brand new feature. So it's called TikTok LiveOps program. It's just kicked off and launched. It's designed to help mobile game publishers sustain engagement and retention through customized support for post-launch activities. The platform has powered 102 LiveOps campaigns already, and it represents a remarkable 9 times growth compared to 2023. So the program supports in-game events, seasonal updates, content refreshes that keeps player engaged. Cool. So very excited to see more kind of in-game behavior and ad units designed to do that. So if you're interested, go to TikTok for Business website to learn more and you sign up. I think it's a program that you really have to work with them on. Mishka, you actually gave me this one because you're like tight with those guys, girls
and guys. So we were supposed to do a podcast about this yesterday, but it didn't work out for the client. So it's a big client that would be talking about in examples because I find this very interesting, just because the LiveOps is the name of the game now on mobile, and so I specifically wanted to have TikTok on a podcast, but not just TikTok, also their client, so we can actually hear about the cases and how it works, because it's not fully clear how they do this. Like how is this any different than your normal marketing? Like what's the tie-in with the LiveOps? But to my understanding, they do tie in their creator economy, and then of course UGC ads are very powerful. So there's that component, but hopefully we can get the recording done next week and we'll publish this as soon as possible. It's a big client, so it will be an interesting story on how to leverage TikTok for your LiveOps. And as a media channel, I think it's a very smart strategy to focus on LiveOps, because not so many folks are launching big games anymore on mobile, but everybody's doing LiveOps and launching events and pushing their products up. So smart strategy.
Yeah, it's a version of retargeting, which can be successful for certain games. Depends on the hooks that they have and how they're doing it. So yeah, I'd love to hear more from them.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance. Adam, let's talk a little bit about Apple.
Another platform that supports creators.
Yes. There's been a rumor posted by 9to5Mac that Apple is working on a new gaming-focused app, which will combine Game Center and App Store together. So think like Xbox or PlayStation's app. Games from the App Store and Apple Arcade would be combined together within this app, fairly similar to the App Store. But to channel in our inner Cress, Phil, can you please do our best Cress interpretation?
I want to be crystal clear. Crystal clear. I called this a fucking year ago. They should have been doing this shit. They should have been doing this from the fucking launch of the App Store. I don't know how they missed this. Now, too late. Too fucking late, Apple.
Stop it. Just stop it.
Yeah, those guys are gangsters.
This is what happens when you leave the podcast.
Yeah. Get roasted, I noticed.
My God, I've noticed in my real life, I have Cressisms now because I hear him so much in my head, and I'm like, everybody, just stop it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm picking it up.
Just the super cynical voice in the back of your head. I still have it as I walk around. Yeah. Okay, let's get to the next one that I'm sure Cress will be screaming from his San Francisco home on. Netflix has shut down its AAA Team Blue gaming studio.
It's about time. It's about time.
Okay. That was a good one, Jen.
This is the big news of the week. Bingo. The music has stopped at Netflix, sadly. And I know we call this, Cress, you called this many times in the pod. And Cress, you'll do your victory dance next week. But I'm not going to dance on this grave. It's still sad that the day has finally come and lots of great people have been let go. And I'm going to butcher the name, but still, like, this is including Chaco Soni. Is that how you say his name? Hopefully. Who's the executive producer on Overwatch and apparently was working on Netflix's AAA PvP shooter. So I've also heard there's been additional impacts to kind of game studio leadership around Netflix. So this is all just generally sad news and signals that the music is stopping at Netflix. So this is on the back of Netflix saying in January that games were doing better than ever. It tripled engagement in the last year, which I think, Phil, you ripped apart because we didn't understand what the baseline was there. So we don't know. And I'm sure Cress will whip this story in two when he gets back. But I think the sad takeaway that I'm reminded of here is that media and tech giants are experimenting with gaming, but you should not trust a plan with blank checks or a long hockey stick. Be wary of joining companies that gaming is an experiment on projects with long payback windows, especially outside of the company's core competency and core mission. And I think AAA, and in this case, what was rumored to be new IP as well, and an IP-based company, patience in a AAA business will be finite. And even last week 2 weeks ago, we were talking about toxic positivity. Conviction in a game is going to be wavering throughout. And if you're in these companies that you're building a new IP, you've got this long hockey stick of promise. Patience in a AAA business will just be finite without extremely effective upward management on those long payback windows. So in general, this is definitely a sad thing. I think the experiment really only lasted 2 years, with the leadership here starting at Netflix only in October 2022. Mishka, you got some notes here?
Well, yeah. Well, first thing, I think you give a fair warning, but I do have to say I've seen some of these comp packages. Once you see that Netflix comp package, it just grab the cheese, son. Like,
and severance.
Yeah. Grab that dough. That's what I say. Like, it's going to be 2 years, but it's going to be a fun ride. So I'm happy that at least they got paid, most of them. So it was a good endeavor, most likely financially, to attempt to build a AAA shooter with Netflix. Now, before this, like, I mean, this is like textbook. This is pretty much what I wrote in June on the blog, Netflix Games second season. So there's new boss that joined, Aline Tescan, probably butchering the name. I'm sorry, Aline. 3 months later, just like with every executive, you give 3 months where you just look at things, you write the names on the wall, and then you start executing 3 months after. And now we're seeing those decisions. So AAA studios shutting down, leadership is changing. It all makes sense. I mean, it did not make sense that Netflix was doing a AAA shooter. Align took a look at it, looked at it for 3 months, and be like, yeah, it does not make sense. So that's being cut down. I think, kind of like projecting going a little bit forward, I think there will be more of these type of changes. Like, we know the studios that they've acquired, their internal development, those, not all of them have released. Like, unfortunately, the ones in Finland that have been running under Netflix for a little bit over 2 years, they acquired Next Games, and then they set up their own studio here, Netflix Game Studio. So they're basically in the same building, but they're called just the different studios. Like, I think they would need to execute on whatever they're doing, and hopefully they will. But it's kind of difficult when we're seeing the traction that these Netflix games are having. And so that sets kind of like the next wave of like what's going to happen to these internal studios. They're going to execute on a strategy that was set by a previous head of games that is not anymore there. And so I would be, wary about that. And hopefully they are able to win the favor and stay alive. But, in my prediction, like I wrote it down, is that we're going to see the pivot at this point, and then most likely another pivot a little bit later when Netflix is moving more towards licensing rather than this extremely expensive internal development that is kind of hard to, find the payback on it. So, all the best, get your dough, and hopefully it works out for everybody.
We talked about this a little bit on the panel at Games Forum because it broke, I think, that day. And Chris has thoughts, as you might imagine.
No, really.
And one of the things and there were some questions from the audience about, well, what is working? And so we talked a little bit about the, why, what is working are some of the smaller games that are mobile games that are tied to their IP. So Too Hot to Handle, or the interactive story apps. And, one of the things that's going to really help them is AI, and the AI ability to pump out the content on the content treadmill that you need to do the basically soft porn interactive stories that they have, that reaches a certain audience. And so I think what they're starting to see is, and their KPIs are really interesting, right? They're trying to do some sort of like longer tail engagement, like KPIs we don't typically look at in, free to play. And so I think what they're all trying to figure out is you have a bunch of game makers coming in trying to be like, okay, what actually works for these kinds of KPIs and engagement? And maybe they're starting to get there. The new leaders from Epic. And so I imagine coming in from Epic, he had some thoughts on a AAA shooter. We will continue to see where they go, but like some of the smartest people in our industry are there.
Yes.
And, if anyone can figure it out, like I hope they do, right? Like I really want them to find the next model. Like we're seeing the next model in Roblox and UEFN and UGC. Maybe something will come. I don't know. I'm trying to be glass half full, and that we don't just.
This is not a next model. This is a model that we've gone over and
multiple
over and
times.
over and
All
over
right.
and over and over.
I know. You're right. I was trying to be glass half full and positive. All right.
No.
So, Mishka, let's talk about investments, because there was another report, the Convoy folks.
Yeah, before we jump in, there were actually a few hires and fires as well happening in the industry that are pretty interesting. So Machine Zone, I think somebody posted on our Slack channel that it's no more. I don't know about that, but there was a post by Nathan Spencer, who's a Machine Zone OG. He spent 9 years there. He was VP of engineering, then 4.5 years as a VP of product at AppLovin. And he basically posted on LinkedIn saying that him and his team are no more at AppLovin and looking for new challenges. And of course, AppLovin acquired Machine Zone back in 2020 when things are getting hot, and everybody was getting acquired for $500 million. Talking about consulting, DOF was there doing due diligence on that, and it was an interesting project. And I would say we still stand on the recommendation we made. Anyways, talking about other stuff, Supercell is all hands on deck for Squad Busters. So this is hiring news. They have clearly a new kind of a pod or a team set up in London. So I would assume that this is probably in the same spaces with Space Ape, who has also been, doing LiveOps for Supercell. I believe they are working on some of the titles. I know they were working on Boom Beach. They're probably working on helping on Heyday. So they have a close collaboration with them. So it makes sense that London is that location. Also, people like London. They moved to London. That's not the same what people are saying about Helsinki. I don't have anything against Helsinki, but let's be, honest. There's also a team being set up in Shenzhen. They're looking for product folks to work on Tencent side to work on Squad Busters. So to me, all this news, all this hiring news is, of course, positive. Who wouldn't like to work at Supercell? Great company. But it also shows the importance of the game for Supercell. Because let's say they're unable, for somewhat reason, to turn it around. That will be the first L that they take since like 2012 when their last game failed. And that will also put a situation where management will actually have to answer, like, what the hell happened? How did you end up launching a game without a soft launch and just, going big on this? Like what happened? And so it's interesting. Another news that was kind of softly tied to this was the CMO departing. You guys talked about it in the last episode, and you kind of, maybe draw the conclusion that, hey, well, she was working on Squad Busters and she bet her, quote unquote job on it, and now she's gone. But that's a false narrative, because the CMO actually left before Squad Busters launched. So it's an interesting case, but looks like they're putting everything and anything behind Squad Busters to turn it around, and that will be great if they do. If they succeed, they have all the resources to succeed. But it's all hands on deck.
Cool. Oh, thank you for that inside scoop on all of that stuff. That's fun.
What was the inside scoop?
I don't know. Well, that you know that they're setting up all of these teams. I haven't seen that really written about. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. So we get, like, sometimes people share the headhunter messages with us. So these are from those. Yeah. When they're asking people if they would be interested in position X and Y. But yeah, I think Supercell is doing the right thing. I think the right thing is to do whatever the fuck it takes to turn this around. That's the right thing.
Phil, can you save it? Do you think you can save it?
Yes. Game Economist Consulting.
No, as we wrote in one of the pieces, like, I think that's the wrong attitude, is to say we should go out and save this. Like, the biggest problem right now is its opportunity cost for a company that's growing, probably wants to IPO and wants to expand. Like, you have your top design chief on this game. He could be doing something else that has far more influence on capital. So, like, they got to set a timeline for themselves, like 1 year in or out, baby. So then I think you got to move on.
Phil, the top design chief is, to my knowledge, not anymore in this game. I think he was GM of this project, and hence the GM role. Like, he was the GM on that one, so the GM role became free. So it's and you said, IPO. I truly believe that Supercell was looking to IPO, especially with the hire of CFO. All these rumors throughout the years, getting a more robust leadership team with a balanced men-female ratio kind of helps you with the IPO approach. And I think that Squad Busters, why they're putting all the resources behind this, could be the reason why they won't be IPOing. So if this one does not turn around, then it's not a good narrative. And so they're putting every effort to make this turn around. And let's say when this does turn around, that's going to be even better narrative. Like, they can correct a game from a nosedive and you can IPO.
It wasn't this. Didn't they get a new CFO and it was Crest saying that CFO had, like, big company, you hire that guy. I think it's a guy when you want to go
public
IPO.
Company CFO. Yeah. He said basically, which is correct, like, you don't hire a public company CFO if you ain't about to go public. That's it. Like, you don't hire a brand marketer if you're not going to do brand.
Maybe.
Or you do. I don't know.
Oh, well, they actually, the CMO, if I remember, she came from King.
Yes.
And so, I think folks that come from those types of experiences are a little bit of the unicorns, right? A little brand, a little performance, but whatever happened, it didn't seem to work out. So one less, sadly, female on that leadership team.
Anyways, let's talk about the investments in M&A. So there were two interesting reports: Convoy quarter Q3 report and Invest Game Q3 reports. So basically, just going super on a high level at a glance, market size $188 billion, increase year over year is at 2%. Projected growth towards 2029 is going to increase towards 3% year over year. For context, the industry. Thank you, Phil, for the image. So for context, the industry grew about 20% compound annual growth rate before 2022, and now it's 10th of that. So we're in a slow growth phase, and it's not going to change according to Convoy, who do exceptionally good reports every time. On the VC side, we're seeing that that growth funding picked up again. So overall amount of funding, overall dollar amount was the same. There was a new low in early stage funding, which means that more money went to growth funding, and then that money was away from new games. So the VCs are very conservative and allocating very carefully. And another interesting tidbit from the information was that U.S. gaming funding were more than, in terms of dollars, more than Asia and Europe combined. So all the money goes to the U.S. But when you look at the number of funding, they were about a third of those. So meaning that the rounds in U.S. are what's the supersized? That would be the correct term. So Americans like it big. They like supersized rounds.
Texans do.
They like the Texan rounds. And then M&A transactions were at the levels of 2023, which is of course low level compared to the crazy years of 2020, 2021, 2022. And exits are important because exits is where the VCs make their money. And so when there's no exits, there's no return on capital. When there's no return on capital, it's harder to raise new funds. And as we've been, basically when you look at the KPIs of all the gaming funds that were raised in 2021, 2022, like on the booming years when you could just raise your hand and get a fund going, those KPIs are not looking good. And so issues with VCs, venture capitalists, being able to raise funds means that the startups will have issues to raise their capital, means that there's going to be less companies getting funded and so forth. So it's kind of a chicken and egg type of a problem that we're seeing. So Phil, you had some interesting graphs that you took away from Convoy as well.
Yeah, I would say, the thing that mostly struck me was like, yep, AI is getting money. They reported that 22% of gaming VC funding in Q3 24 went into companies related to or referencing AI. So it is happening. Buckle in, it is happening. And some of these AI companies I hadn't heard before. I'm not as involved in the space, I'm sure, as you are, Mishka. But Volley, Series Entertainment, Astrocade, these ones, Carbonated I'd heard of, but these are companies that seem to be up and coming too, and they raised huge amounts of capital. Volley is 55 million alone.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. There were some graphs saying that there's not going to be less AI funding. I'm familiar with some of those companies. Medica, definitely familiar with that. Shout out to them. But I wanted to add to this news since you're showing largest gaming AI VC deals. I just received a message before we started recording from Anton Galfin, who was the founder and CEO of Huge Games, the social casino games company. So he launched a new company called Beyond OS. It's an AI company at the intersections of AI and entertainment. So having fun with AI. He's been posting a lot of AI generated images on LinkedIn where he looks like James Bond. Those are not real. Those are AI generated. People are like, you look jacked, dude. I'm like, yeah, he is jacked, but like, guys, come on. Like AI. Anyway, Anton is a builder with a capital B. He's so when he's doing something, he's super excited about it, and he's super excited about this company. I'm curious to see what they will build with the AI. Step into the future of game monetization with Xsolla. Xsolla empowers developers and publishers to market, sell, connect, and optimize their games globally. From payment solution to a full suite of tools designed to grow your game's revenue while fostering a loyal player base. Xsolla is your game's gateway to worldwide success. With Xsolla, the world is your playground. Visit xsolla.com today and find all the solutions that will help you to power your games into success everywhere.
All right, let's talk some games. Age of Empires finally out. Phil, you had a look?
It's here. Age of Empires is out. It is from Timmy, if you remember correctly. This is a 4X game, but is using, I don't know, we could call it the 4X meta of changing what might be the initial gameplay from the eventual gameplay. And so just a quick 4X refresher. And unfortunately, this is a PNG image, so it doesn't have the best background. But if we look at market share in terms of downloads for the 4X genre, and again, we're using the sensor tower definition here, which I think does a pretty good job of capturing 4X. There are one or two things that seem to slip, like Sea of Conquest was a recent Fun Plus release that didn't end up getting classified here. But by and large, I think this does a pretty good job of capturing it. And the United States has been around a fourth of 4X revenue. And the other, I would say, large share when it comes to revenue rather than downloads has actually been China. China actually swings pretty hard when it comes to revenue per download. They're swinging far above what you would expect from their download share when it comes to just absolute revenue that comes from 4X. And when we look at the top games year to date in the 4X space, it's exactly who you'd expect, at least recently, if you've been following the news. Last War Survival has been number one by and far, $293 million. Whiteout Survival is another $200 million. Envany, oh my God, this thing's been running forever. This thing has been running forever. And this is just US, by the way. We're just looking at US, did 140 million. I was surprised to see some of the games on here. If there's another game you don't see on here, which is Star Trek Fleet Command, which has actually gotten exceptionally soft recently. Oh shit, we can't, Adam, you want us to cut this?
Yes, please.
No, I won't talk about it. We'll just cut it. All right. Well, here, I'll just give me a sec.
Yeah, dear Dom.
Can I say that Star Trek Fleet Command is not in here? Or does that freak you out?
No, you can say that. That's factual.
Okay.
Just like don't like do a thing on the future of Star Trek.
Okay. I was actually gonna like soft. I wasn't that okay. You don't see Star Trek Fleet Command on here. It's actually fallen out of the top 10 in terms of revenue in the United States, and you see a lot of Chinese companies dominating the US. In fact, most of the games on here from Chinese companies. Not Score Warriors. Score Warriors is Cyprus.
A what?
Score Warriors. Total Battle War of Empires. That is actually from Cyprus. It's a one game company. They're actually formerly from Russia. They relocate a lot of people to Cyprus. Really great people.
Somebody relocated from Russia to Cyprus? What?
Yeah, you've never heard of that before. They're building a pipeline. So we have some data, but it has been released, and it's actually a relatively strong launch. And I chose Sea of Conquest to benchmark it against. We could choose a million different games, but I would say the theme has been the same in that Timmy, which is the developer, they licensed it from Microsoft, it looks like. So this is a Tencent game. They actually did a little bit of burst marketing to start, and they got around 1 million downloads at launch, a little bit more than 1 million downloads. That's far and above a lot of 4X launches recently. So they're giving this thing a big boost to see whether or not it'll have any traction. Let's keep track of it. Let's see how it does. But this is a pretty explosive, at least high budget launch. I don't think this is anything about game quality, but there's still a lot of competition that's happening in 4X, even post IDFA.
Oh, I mean, this category is still on fire. But I love your take. It's not really a take. The fact that almost all of these games that are popular in the US and monetizing are by Chinese companies. And so I wonder, is that because of the amount of people that you need to just do the content for the, I mean, I would love to learn more. That seems interesting to me.
Yeah,
didn't this used to be like a US thing? Like a lot of those games?
So this used to be Machine Zone, back when Machine Zone was led by their CEO, who would sue the shit out of everybody who even put in 4X's back to back. And so they kind of dominated this market. But you can't sue the Chinese because send a letter cease and desist over to Beijing and they're not going to obey. Anyways, just joking around. But what happened was like the Chinese developers really rose from China. There was plenty of them. Some of them are still on the list. And these type of games, like they take quite big of a team. Like Machine Zone was deceptively ugly looking small game, small like not Machine Zone, Game of War, and then what was the other one with Arnold on the top of it?
Mobile Strike.
Mobile Strike. Like they're deceptively simple looking games, but in fact they are almost like social platforms. And so especially the engineering teams have to be really, really robust, and the team size of these games, even back in the days, went to hundreds, and very few of the publishers, developers were able to achieve that. But what makes them also very interesting is that once you have one game made, you can actually make several ones, because you essentially have the platform, you have the LiveOps.
You have the engine. That's what I don't think people understand is the 4X engine is very expensive. I have a Breaking Bad Empire Business Tattoo to show you that. Here's where the engine broke. But the engine is actually rather expensive. Like, you usually host 10,000 people in a single shard or single world, and they're mirrored worlds, and that's requires a lot of server engineers.
Yes, and the running costs are pretty expensive. There's the synchronous translation elements. Like, all of this is so hardcore. And yeah, they have incredibly high LTVs. They've used all the possible, like, if you look at Ebony's creative strategies, you will find every single creative strategy ever done on mobile inside that one app. They just do everything. So their playbook is do everything, and they can afford that because the LTVs are so high. And now we're seeing a lot of other genres taking a playbook out of 4Xs. Like, we've seen card battle, not card battle, but puzzle RPG games take a piece of this. We're seeing some other ones where they're combining different genres, and so we started off with mini games, but now it's more like genre mashes, where there is that 4X element that allows that social, crazy, competitive, high LTV gameplay. But yeah, most of them are coming in from China.
Archero 2 has soft launched in Canada, and a quick recap of Habby's portfolio, because I think sometimes we forget that Archero has faded quite a bit. It still is, I would say, an incredible story. I remember this is one of the almost original DOF pieces on it, with the founder who would go and found Navic too, that, you know, was built in Unity assets by default. It's one of those inspiring indie stories that kind of built Habby the developer into what it is today. But it's fallen on hard time. I won't say hard times. It's certainly declined in terms of revenue. Ended up topping out at around 250 million net revenue. That doesn't include ads. We know ads are a decent source of revenue in Archero. But when you look at Habby's portfolio, Survivor.io has really been the success story. It launched much later than Archero did. Archero, I think, was 2018, 2019, and Survivor.io came out in late 2022. Survivor.io has done over 400 million, and Archero has done around 250 million. And Survivor.io's trajectory also looks a lot better. Habby's other games have been mostly chunk change in their portfolio in terms of driving revenue for them. It's almost all Survivor.io, Archero, and then a little bit of Souls, which is their squad-like RPG, which just kind of came out of nowhere in terms of like their usual playbook. And we know they have not only Archero 2, which we just mentioned, soft launch, they've got Capybara Go, which is another game that we should talk about pretty soon, which has been exciting. SSS Snaker, if you remember that was another recent release that they went global with. Looks really soft, probably won't be hanging around for another year or two. Certainly not the longevity it's had with the other titles.
I don't know how to say the name of the new game, but I'm just going to call it the Koopa Traba game.
Capybara?
Yeah, it's like the cutest little, like, what is that thing? It's like a guinea pig?
Yeah, you see them in Japan all the time.
Well, I'm not often in Japan, so
it's like a guinea pig that ate a dog, a small dog.
What?
Sounds but when looking at these revenue curves, like, everyone holds up Habby as like this perfect developer for hybrid games. Are there any good examples of hybrid casual games that have durable revenue curves in terms of like not that kind of spike and decay over time, but actually grow over time?
Yeah, good point. I don't know about growth. I can't think of any that have grown. They usually, I mean, it's get a lot of downloads very quickly, CPI spike. Hold on
Move
tight.
on. Yeah.
Hold on.
So this becomes more like that kind of spike, 2 to 3 years lifetime, but then you've got to be able to move on to your next hybrid casual game. And the advantage, obviously, is dev costs and dev timing is significantly shorter. But I would just look at that, like I look at that cumulative curve. Sorry, the next image you have there. of like the stacked area graph of their revenue. And I'm looking at this like, hey, Survivor.io is a great game, obviously spiked up revenue, but this feels like a sinking sand business model where you've got to continually feed that engine with new games instead of a traditional live service business where you can build up a solid foundation and build on those new games.
I think that's fair. I think it is a good case study for hybrid casual's problem, which is like, okay, we solved acquisition, we solved early game, we solved some monetization issues, but we can't solve long run retention. And I think that's also apparent when you just play where Archero is right now. There's like a million different verticals, gameplay verticals and things. Like they've just been like just like bolting on features.
Yeah.
Like there's a farm animal raising feature. Like it's a whole loop. Like they kind of just keep throwing shit at it. And so, okay, what do you do if you're hybrid casual? Like this is the next thing they got to deal with. It is like, okay, well, you solved acquisition, you solved early retention. How do you translate this into long run retention?
Yeah,
I'm constantly thinking like comparing the two stories, right? You think about 4X as probably the most durable live model on mobile, right? And then you compare this to the hybrid casual model here, and you're like, how did the advantage of this is you can get those downloads. The disadvantage of it is that you kind of kneecap yourself by intentionally creating these lighter weight progression systems and then having to, instead of, add new interesting progression vectors, now you're just adding whole new progression verticals onto your game, like farming, in order to try to sustain it as best you can, instead of like, how do we marry this better to a more durable live model to begin with?
Let me try to answer this, Adam. We're talking about two very different type of business models, and so there's not one is better than the other one. Like when we're talking about 4X, only very few companies have the resources to even enter the competition in 4X games because of that. And then on the other side, you have hybrid casual, which is, Phil, if you want to open up the next image, I put it in from our hybrid casual playbook done by Deconstructor Fun together with Meta. So basically what you have
consultants, here... come on, man.
Do we have a Game Economist consulting slide in here? Is that in the back?
Where's Jade Inferno?
Yeah, we're
anyway. So be careful, you'll be consulting too soon. Anyways, so the definition of hybrid casual games is like there's 4 elements to that. There's the design part, which is you're taking a hyper casual game and you are adding stats-based progression in most of them, like except the puzzle games, but you're adding a stats-based progression, and that allows you to do the live operation, attacking all those added elements of the core loop, which in order to increase the retention, in order for you to actually have a D30 and to bid against D30, because your game might have like 3 months to 6 months of lifetime. Then you have the marketing part, which because these games are produced relatively fast and compared to other casual games, the production values are not so high. So you're trying to market them at the lower CPIs, just like the hyper casual game. The production, it's high speed. It takes a lot of elements from hyper casual, but just adds that another element, which is basically production and LiveOps. And then finally, there's the monetization, which is the combination of in-app ads and in-app purchases. But overall, like you make a very good comparison by putting in basically the 2 different spectrums of the business. You got the 4Xs where you're trying to keep the player for 10 years and so forth. And then you take the ones where you have a game that just doesn't have the same type of a lifetime. We're talking about probably months of active gameplay over years. But then again, who's really succeeding in hybrid casual is the hybrid casual publishers. Like we're looking here at Habby, and you would be seeing a growth inside their portfolio. And when you look at their different games, they're using actually the same meta systems, and they are actually publishing other developers' games, because if you look at them, if you launch the game, some of them have a different publisher name. So they're able to get that innovation coming in from other studios, then tack in their central tech tools, their LiveOps systems, their meta progression system, sometimes maybe even doing a full-on asset acquisition and just running that game that has very good early stage retention in order to move forward from that day 30. So just a totally different business model, not worse, not better, but in order to be a successful hybrid casual publisher, you essentially have to be a real-ass publisher. Like you have to have more than one. You can't just rely on one game bringing all of your revenue from now to eternity.
All right. What's next, folks? All right. I'm throwing something in there. So I noticed that Tencent's Delta Force has had listen to me, Phil, with a Steam comment. They had a killer Steam Next Fest. And they've announced their open beta for PC, and they've actually moved out the mobile version of the game and the console version of the game to 2025. So this is a kind of a realistic extraction shooter, lots of different modes. It got over 2 million wish lists on Steam, and it was the 4th most wish list title on the platform currently. Actually, it is right now. It topped all of the official Steam Next Fest charts, with the game being in the top spot on trending upcoming, popular upcoming, and top demos. I think it beat out the X Riot Theorycraft game. I think came in second.
Super Vive. We should
Super
talk about
Vive.
that soon too.
Yeah. No, of course. I love those guys. Because it's, I know, and we gotta wait for Cresto because it's kind of like a MOBA hybrid, and I want him to be here for that. So with the thing that I thought was really funny and actually really shitty is that Delta Force came out and announced that their open beta was on December 5th, which is one day before the very publicly stated NetEase's Marvel Rivals open beta launch on December 6th. So not sure if that's putting the middle finger up to somebody else. It's like kind of the anti-Price is Right strategy, though, to come in the one day before. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens, with those two kind of coming out at the same time. Phil, I thought of you and I saw this. This feels like a game that's up your alley. And what do you think about the idea of splitting out the platforms? We see that as a bad thing, but I was curious to hear your take.
So Adam, we just hosted a panel on first-person shooters, which we will. I don't know, Adam. When are you going to release that?
When are we going to release the podcast? As soon as it's ready. I think all signs are good. So hopefully, actually, pretty quickly right after this.
So we talk a lot about first-person shooters, and interestingly enough, this one did not make the list. Jen, when you push a mobile SKU back for a PC SKU, it usually means it's dead. There's usually some person who's fighting for the dual SKU strategy, and when push comes to shove, the mobile SKU is always the one that gets the boot. I think that this has happened to me 3 times in my career. I can think of 3 specific projects where this was in a P&L, which made the P&L look good. Boosts everything up. Usually it's an HD developer that doesn't know how to do mobile. And although to the point, like, this is Timmy, if I understand correctly. So this is Timmy. Let's see if they can actually deliver on this. But it's not a good sign when the mobile SKU gets delayed. I guess that's all I have to say on this one. Let's see.
I kicked ass on Steam.
I don't give a shit that the mobile SKU is delayed. Like, I think this lives or dies mostly based on PC.
Yep.
And if they can get a footprint on console. Like, for me, like, yeah, I get the P&L games. But this thing lives or dies if on PC, and playing it, like, I think like it could do well on mobile given the pedigree of the developer. But I just think that it's incremental and tacked on. And if it could be launched 6 months later, like, yes, it'll have an impact. It wouldn't be as big of a launch if you can do it all at the same time. But the reality is, like, this thing lives or dies based on its retention. And I hope that the open beta can give them some signals, but it almost makes more sense for me to, like, go on PC first, go out for like 6 months on PC, make sure retention is solid, and then get a amazing 1.0 release 6 months out, which is all PC, mobile, console, all at the same time. And then you throw your marketing eggs in that basket. I like that strategy. From playing this, like, it's interesting too, because it's a Battlefield and Tarkov, right? Like, it's got extraction and Battlefield. I actually mostly played the Battlefield mode, and it was pretty good. Like, it was a pretty good thing. So, like, for me, this is also just signaling, like, the pedigree of Chinese developers, being able to go after a space that most people have pointed to, like, being Western dominant, with Battlefield and DICE. And it's a pretty good version, and I'm all hats off to them. But I think from our PvP podcast, the bar is very, very high to retain. So I'm more bullish on a strategy to make sure the retention is good and delay that launch if they can't get the retention up to par.
And Battlefield's weak. Like, Battlefield has been weak for a really long time, and it pains me to say that. But Battlefield's weak. They're not shipping on normal 2-year cycles. They're not employing the COD strategy that died with Hardline. There is movement on Steam in these large scale shooters. Like, if you look at Hell Let Loose, If you look at some of these military large scale 64 32 player shooters, like there is interesting things happening on Steam, and I wonder if if you can actually get content right, which has been Dice's problem that I can talk about with excruciating specificity.
Let's get into that.
I mean, honestly, just compare the number of guns that were released in Battlefield 4 to Battlefield 2042, and I think you can really just tell all of Dice's story through a chart of the number of guns released at each SKU. I think that does a pretty effective job, and I do wonder what happens in AAA when you think about a content-heavy game that it is like a large-scale Battlefield, and you actually have the headcount to match it. What happens? And I don't think we've seen Chinese live service in AAA in a big way. And it's interesting that Marvel Rivals, which for whatever reason I feel like has gotten such a big conversation. Super War, which is the MOBA, never got this much conversation. But Marvel Rivals, it's also from China. There's a lot of AAA Chinese stuff coming. Black Myth Wukong was a warning shot. And we already know that Blade Point Naraka has done incredible business on Steam. It's been there for a couple of years. I just wonder, fast forward 10 years from now, what is the share of the Steam charts that are dominated by Chinese publishers? Much higher than I would assume today.
Which is great. I think it forces
Agreed.
then a lot of the out of Chinese developers to innovate and to think through their live operations, which is great. I would just say with Delta Force launching right on top of Marvel Rivals, there will be it'll be very difficult to raise the bar. The one nice thing here, though, is you're talking about Battlefield. Remember, Vince announced next year, I think it's the end of next year, is when the big Battlefield bet is coming. They announced it at their recent investor panel, which included a lot of studios all supporting one Battlefield. So we're saying Battlefield's dead now. By the fall, I think EA is putting a lot of eggs in that basket.
To be clear, she's alive. She's
alive. Phil is toning down his language. Okay, Phil, it is hanging out.
Support.
The back catalog does crazy business. I'll say that. We're still selling a lot of Battlefield 1s. Still selling a lot of Battlefield 4s.
Yeah, but it looks like they're learning from 2042, and they're putting. It's not as if they're decreasing investment in the next franchise. They're definitely increasing it and putting the right people on it. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, just not on mobile.
Yeah. I'm just most baffled by the fact that before the recording, Phil said that he doesn't think that Delta Force is a real thing. That's
the capital D Delta Force, actual team.
The one
there's a name that's called Delta Force, but it's not like
it's a military unit.
Yes, military unit, but not there isn't a specific team that's called Delta Force.
Yes, there is. When you need hostage rescue, like the one for the U.S. Hostages in Tehran, that was Delta Force.
No, all I mean is Bob. Bob
Chuck
isn't
Norris
I'm Delta Force. Okay, all right, I'll give you that.
Anyways.
Boy, all right. Well, let's move on to another topic that I thought was really interesting and has come up a lot, and I think it was actually a former Sony leader was out there talking about, the kind of almost like the death of AA, and that, how does this kind of impact the ecosystem? But, Adam, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, sure. So it was Sean Layden, who's head of Sony's worldwide studios previously. And he was talking about the disappearance of AA studios. Talked about how today's green lights are too focused on monetization. Come on, Phil. Recurrent revenue. Come on, Phil. Subscription formula.
Wait, we need to make money when we spend hundreds of millions of dollars? Oh,
and
I'm
not
sorry.
enough on is it fun? And it's pointing to budgets, which are in the triple digits, driving down risk tolerance, especially for sequels and proven models. The direct quote, we're seeing collapse of creativity in games today with studio consolidation at the high cost of production. To be honest, we've covered this. So
I'm throwing up in my mouth right now.
I don't know. I agree with this. We've talked about the risk tolerance for AAA going down, and this is even true on mobile, especially given the ecosystem. But to be honest, I look back at myself 15 years ago, and I was still looking at a stack of discs with the number 3 or more on it. It's not as if this has been a abrupt transition in the last 5 years. There's always been a slow and steady transition towards less and less risk taking in the AAA industry. And specifically, Sean was pointing to the death of AA. In the gaming business, you have Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, and indie stuff, but then that middle layer used to be where Interplay, Gremlin, Ocean, THQ, and a lot of those companies made their money. That middle piece is gone. So if you can become AAA, you can survive. If you can do something interesting in the indie space, you could, but AA is gone. That's the direct quote, which, to be honest, I'm confused by. I'd like to take some time with Cress and talk about it. Also dive into some newsy data, because like every day on LinkedIn, somebody's pointing to Helldivers, Palworld, Baldur's Gate, and Space Marine as the future, while AAA
it's a false
is in shambles.
flag. It's a false flag. So,
like I want to look at more data to confirm or deny this thesis, right? Because back in July, Newzoo reported on AA's fortunes actually being much better this year after an abysmal 2023. So for the flagship there, the example in my mind there is Alan Wake 2 in 2023, having a real big struggle despite a critical success. But that was a lot to do with AAA slate. This year, the AAA slate's weaker, and then you have a AA growth. Okay. But is AA dead? I generally just think it's just changing hands to publishers that can better align with what players want. So AA actually being a big part of the future, because as we've talked about many times on this podcast, we need to figure out ways for AAA devs to be able to lower costs, raise quality, and raise margins overall. And I think AA could be a very much critical part of that conversation. And I think, yes, those like examples, those outliers of Helldivers, Palworld, and Baldur's Gate are outliers, but they still signal that like if we can find out the right things that players value, lean into those, there is a future. But if AAA continues to raise costs, and if AA continues to struggle in terms of getting the units sold on some of those smaller bets, then to be honest, both AA and AAA are in struggles.
Adam, can you kind of walk us through like what is AA, AAA, and quadruple A, which is also being used by companies like Ubisoft? Like, can you give us a little bit of a taxonomy and with a game as an example?
Sure. I don't know what single A is. I've never heard a single A game.
Is it like BattleBit? Like any kind of an indie game would be a single A?
Just throwing shade. No, you've got like
4 guys
like
with
there's
BattleBit.
Okay, so there's AAA, which hopefully I don't have to define, but is like typically right now is going to be triple digits or more types of game developments, mostly made by major publishers. AA is typically lower costs, so between say like 10 and 100 million dev cost types of projects, given the state of the industry right now. So good examples of this would be things like Alan Wake, would be things like Control, Space Marine. That's typically in that AA range. And then indie is everything kind of falls lower than that. So that would be the Slay the Spires. Like the if you want to try to like really ladder it up by dev cost, you can go less than 10. But then again, like even then Palworld would be technically indie, even though I think some people might say it's on the line to AA.
Yeah. Well, so Chris's point on Palworld specifically is that there is a lot of money that they got to make that. So that, I've heard his story 3 times, so I'll repeat it, which is they started in 2015. They kind of, in his words, like ripped off Zelda. So they built the engine, and then they transitioned. They took money from Microsoft, which was an original $7 million. And then they actually had additional funding that isn't often talked about that took them above the 10 million. And it took them, 9 years to make that thing. So Palworld, I think Helldivers also has some, additional, it's backed by Sony and they have a lot of help.
It was also like a lot of time, right? Like
multi-year,
I forget what it was, but 8-year type of production. Yep.
Yeah. And so these are the, when these are the ones held up as the AAs, they're not exactly what AA really is. And so I think when that's been the challenge, is pointing to what is an actual AA success story. There aren't as many of them. And what we see from all the Newzoo data in both MAU and in revenue is the consolidation right now in a mature industry that the big are getting bigger. And all of the playtime, all of the revenue are going to the franchises. There's only, I think it's, if I remember correctly, 8% of people of playership going to new games in 2023. It is,
I think you're looking
as
at
much
the
as
wrong metric.
Okay.
I don't think playtime is the success metric for box games in terms of playtime share in the year. It's going to be revenue share of the whole thing, and then making sure that we use the right categorization of the different games.
I don't know if I'm only talking about box games, because some of these games are live operated experience. And so that's a good distinction. And we can go back when we pulled the data and talk about those things. But I think the general takeaway is that it feels like in a mature industry, the bigger getting bigger. And we are seeing a lot of challenges with AA finding, true AA's finding success.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So that's the thing, is like if I looked at that Newzoo graph, right? 2023 was an abysmal year. So when we look at 2024, that's a pretty low baseline to say like the amount of growth. Also, AAA, the slate is significantly weaker this year. And the AAA games have there's been a lot of really struggling AAA games this year, where then that AA category has been doing better. But then you go, it's actually still roughly equal to what was happening in 2022. So it's not as if there's this like massive spike and now AA is successful. This has just been like a continuing segment of the market from pre-2023.
But I think you're right. And the core question, Jen, is like, put away all the AA, AAA bullshit. Everyone just wants to know can small guys win? Is there still an opportunity for small guys to come in and win, both in mobile and HD? And the analysis usually returns, well, the bigger getting bigger, exactly to your point, Jen. However, we want to cut that. The problem with a lot of those analysis is that they don't show us the growth in the market. So for instance, like if you ranked, let's say 25th in 2020, and we looked at what it meant to be ranked 25th top grossing in, let's say, 2024, you would be at a much lower rank because the overall revenue of the App Store has increased. So you can be a lower rank, for instance, and still make the equivalent amount of money that you would have made beforehand. So even if the bigger taking bigger shares, the pie could be growing at such a rate that everyone could still be doing better. You could still have a shot to get into the market. I haven't seen that analysis done. That's the analysis I want to see, is what does it translate to in terms of ranks? But I think it would probably show something similar to what you're speculating on, Jen. It just may not be as bad as you would expect. But this is what happens when genres get refined. I don't think there's anything... I don't understand what this conversation has always confused me. To your point, Adam, there's never any data. It's just like AAA is dead, AA is dead. I feel like I go through these cycles like every fucking 6 months. Like I just want to puke in my mouth. It's just like people talking out of their ass. It drives me fucking crazy. Yeah. It drives me fucking crazy. We don't have any data
using
on this.
Real data.
Yep.
Well, one of the
the thing is, we'll never get production. We'll never get production stuff.
Well, so at LA Tech Week last week, a lot of folks we were talking about this topic, and I have a lot of friends that are trying to go raise money in that, $3 to $10 million range. And their feedback is nobody wants to talk to them or give them money in that range. It's no man's land is what they were calling it in terms of the ability to go raise money to be able to do that.
PC console?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's not enough.
Yeah, and so
that
range.
Sorry.
Well, but that sure. I'm not saying it was a shooter. I don't know exactly. I don't know if you can. So, or can we not make games for that amount of money at all? Is it truly a no man's land, and you just can't make a PC game?
It's just the amount of risk. So the type of like KPIs that I'd love to see is margins, because the issue is like, when we just look at it in playtime, obviously it's going to skew heavily towards multiplayer live service games. If you look at it on revenue, then you're going to see like more to do with the units up front. But the reality is, as we've seen from like the Sony leak, a lot of those AAA games might be able to get a lot on revenue, but the reality is those costs are raising so high that they end up being unprofitable. Versus like, is there a space in AA where you can get between like, let's say like 5 million to 50 million in funding and be more profitable on a margin basis? And I think you actually had a little bit of a preview in this when you saw the Embracer shakeup and you looked at their different business units, one AA publisher and one more indie, and where the margins actually shook up and where the margins were higher between their different business units.
That's interesting. I know that the Devolver, like if you think about the really small PC publishers like Devolver or I forgot what Good Shepherd just rebranded into, a lot of their funding is sub $3 million for the games that they're looking at doing, and even less than that. And so it just feels weird that there are these, that there's that big no man's land in the middle of like, hey, I'm going to play a little kind of indie game and spend $10 or $20 on that item versus, I think another thing we didn't talk about is AA is also a price point to a player. I think it's 30 or maybe it's 40 or below. I think I read that somewhere that that's another kind of benchmark for people is what are you selling that thing for? And so you're right, Adam, that, okay, if it's from a player perspective, I'm going to buy a AA game for X amount of retail cost, 30 or 40, then I have to factor that in to my overall margin structure. And is that going to, am I going to be able to survive on that? I don't know.
No, the perfect data here would be margins and sort of risk profile at each one of those different dev cost bands to be able to give you a sense of like where the market is growing. The unfortunate bit is like, because there's no way we would ever get that data. It's just never going to happen. Then we start to get these piecewise LinkedIn articles on like Power World and Space Marine. And then you don't hear all of those stories of these AA developers. A lot of these games all struggling because they end up going too high cost for the relatively low amount of units they end up selling.
Cool. All right.
Can I add this on like a totally a tangent note that could be absolutely worth nothing or they could be something? So I was thinking about this in the sense, like the Sean's point, that's almost like could be or could not be, of course, the projection from what happened in movie business. So when DVD back in the days when we were young, DVDs were a big thing, and it was part of the business. It was part of your business case, meaning that there was less pressure to launch that next big movie with a big box office because you could afford get a lot of a bigger chunk sometimes of your revenue coming in from DVD sales before it was sold for TV rights and so forth. And so movies could be made to appeal to a smaller audience, but beforehand because of the DVD sales, but because the DVD died, it made such more focused films a huge risk for the studios, which leads to studios then doing their AAA releases, the franchises, the Marvels, the re-releases of the movies, the breaking points and whatnot, and that kind of led to death of certain types of movies that we all loved, like the original rom-coms. Shout out to Matthew McConaughey back when he was doing great movies. and all kinds of like family movies and so forth. Like we just don't see them anymore. And even when I was Googling like what were the sort of a biggest DVD movies, like Shawshank Redemption was actually a huge on DVD. Like it did poorly in box office. Fight Club didn't do that well in box office. Blade Runner, apparently a DVD. Hugo, the Oscar winning. And of course, the biggest ones were animation. Anything that Pixar and other ones, because you could buy those and then kids would rewatch them 2,000 times. And my point here is more about like when this sort of a channel died, what happened was that the studios focused on big releases, big franchises, big bets, and it's win or go bust. And streamers take the smaller movies, but they're quite not investing the same way. So is this kind of like the thing that is happening with it's for sure happening with AAA, because the investment cost is so big that you have to be very conservative. You have to do a part of a franchise. Like this is Battlefield XV or Call of Duty, of this year and so forth. But you can't just take any more of these risks. And through that, you're not being able to do the AA games like Alan Wake 2 that seem to have failed even to recoup its development costs. So could be totally wrong thinking.
Mishka, 1999 called and wants its business model back.
Yeah. Bring back rom-com. That's what I'm saying.
Well, bring back DVD. I mean, listen, oh my God, when I was at Disney, that DVD unit, they were printing money with those Disney DVDs with that, especially it was a limited time, right? They were the creators of FOMO, and they would go out and say, it's Little Mermaid on DVD. You can only get it this year. And then it's never out again. And so all the parents are rushing to, buy the DVD. And then those assholes wanted to put a plush with the DVD, and I'm trying to sell plush for $15 at a store, and they want to give it away for free. And so imagine the fight that happen between those two business units. No, but I think, it's interesting that because of the amount of games available on Steam, it's like 10,000 every year, people just move on to the next thing. And so there is no kind of back half revenue opportunity. And Phil, I don't know, you're probably better at this than...
What are you talking about? People sell back catalog all the time. Like Black Myth Wukong.
Really?
Back with Wukong still is like top 20 engagement. You can make a lot of money on
catalog?
Look, I'm saying outside of launch month, like you can still make money on the back catalog. We were just talking about Battlefield. Battlefield still sends a shit ton of units on Battlefield 4, still has a really active player base. Battlefield 1, like they are making good amounts of money every single year. They pay dividends. And I assume that all these AA games we've just been talking about, Space Marine, I would assume that one of the decisions to greenlight Space Marine 2 was looking at the tail sales for the original Space Marine, which had a pretty big cult following too. To Mishka's point, like you can still find an audience here. Like DVD has always existed for games. You can go play these single player games at any point. I would argue like the technological, like the capital degradation is stronger in games though than a rom-com. Like playing a game from 1990 is a far worse experience than watching a movie from 1990.
All right. So we've gone for a long time. Thank you very much. And we will see you next week, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry's best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand. Or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.